Hey everybody, it's Anita here. Welcome back to the Messy Middle, One Mom's Journey to Build a Profitable Business. I have Emily Elizabeth here. She is the founder of the podcast, What Fulfills You. She's also a New York City based entrepreneur. And yeah, Emily, thank you so much for being on the show today. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Anita. I'm excited to be here as well.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background. You have a marketing agency that's currently based in New York and you serve clients
Mhm.
mostly on the coast, right? In New York and
Mhm.
LA. So give us maybe a little bit more of that background and we'll dive into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shortly after college, I worked in sales for just about a year in a corporate setting. And right after, that's when I started my marketing agency, Lost Hatton. And this started out of, I think, two things. Number one, the desire to really help brands elevate their
Mm,
social media and actual storytelling strategy online,
mhm.
something
Yeah.
that I personally felt like lacked in that industry, but
Mhm.
also because this was a skill set that I practiced all throughout college. It just happened to be right time, right place in the sense that I grew up in the time of Instagram and
Yeah.
social media and digital marketing and played around with it on the side outside of school. So that became a skill set of mine and then turned it into a business of my own. But all of that, I think people always wonder how I did that at the age of 23, 24 years old. And it really stems back to my early years as a competitive figure skater and tennis player. I
Oh,
was
wow.
a competitive athlete in both sports for over 10 years.
Mhm.
And I was able to do both sports because they're both very individual when you're playing at a high level. And luckily had an older brother who trained me in tennis. And so I think as a athlete, it helped me learn discipline
Mhm.
and focus at a very young age from
Right.
five years old onwards. And I think that parlayed into my tenacity and my interest in doing so long term as an adult. I started thinking about, okay, how do I want to live my life? And I will say this because this is very interesting. I think people often ask me where the discipline comes from, besides just the fact that I had it in practice as a
Mhm.
former athlete. I think looking back when I was younger, I didn't get to apply myself in the way that I wish I could have now looking back in figure
Mhm.
skating, especially. I look back and I remember there are practices and moments that I could have applied myself more. I could have put in more than 100%. And so I think that's probably the only thing that I have some level of regrets in, and that
Mhm.
has transformed and shown in the way I apply myself in my work and in my life. My relationship today is I'm always thinking back to, I don't want to have a regret that I could have tried harder in the way that I want to in this part of my life. So that's the journey that took me to really building and starting my own businesses.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. So let's break that down a little bit, Emily. Like you mentioned a couple things that I'd love to dive into a little bit more. You talked about storytelling in the context of sharing what's going on in our businesses and being able to draw clients in, like how important
Mhm.
that is. Then you also talked about that athletic piece and the drive that comes from that, and then also the regret. So let's start with storytelling. Like, why is it more than ever before? Why is storytelling super important for us as entrepreneurs and in our businesses?
Yeah, I think the reality is that the barrier to entry in a lot of businesses or
Mhm.
being an entrepreneur per se is a little bit lower now.
Mhm.
That being said, there needs to be ways for us to differentiate ourselves when we're
Mhm.
entering the market or when we are in an existing market. When I work with my brands that are a lot of them are hotels in big metro cities like New York, Miami, Los Angeles. And so when you look at, okay, how do we stand out from competitors? A lot of it comes down to what connects humans, what makes us
Mm.
feel an emotion, right?
Yeah.
And it often is related to a story. And so I think just like when we are dating or when we are building friendship with someone, whether in our 20s or teens or as kids, there's a story part to it when we're going, oh, where are you from? Or, oh,
Yes.
what's your favorite color, right? For the kids. And there's a story element to it that connects us to the person. And I think when you are a business or a brand, you must create that human element. And in order to do that,
Mm.
you must create a story out of it.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Because if we think about it, people don't just buy products, right?
Yeah.
People buy
Hmm.
because they have a connection with another person out there. And they don't buy based even on needs. They buy based on their wants. They might
Hmm.
say, I need somebody to help me with my social media, but it's really a want that's underneath that. And so I love that. I love how you're describing creating a story, bringing back the human element to business. It's almost how do I join the conversation that's already going on in their head? And if it makes sense for me to come alongside of that and join that conversation and tell my story. So, what do you do? How do you help coach clients to be able to expand on their story? Like, I know some folks are some people are just afraid to tell their whole story. What do you do in
Mhm.
that case?
Yeah, in my case, I luckily work with a lot of hotels, as I mentioned. And so,
Yes.
in a lot of cases, I think the barrier or obstacle I run into is that some of these operators who operate the hotels don't even know where they need to begin with their marketing or what they need to
Yes.
shift 5 or 10 years prior, where what they need to do to stay up to date. And so that's where I come in and really showcase to them, hey, in my industry example, it's like you can't just be showing stock photos of what your hotel room looks like, all right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what the lobby looks like, because nowadays we're advanced. We know that kind of looks too staged. We want to see a little bit more rawness, right? And I think that's a
Yeah.
parallel to if you are a coach or you're a personal brand, right? You need to show an element of rawness and what makes you who you are. And I think the less staginess of how you present yourself, whether as a hotel brand or as a personal brand, I think
Yeah.
that's what connects the dots with human to human connection. And so that's how I really frame it as, okay, this is where we need to start in order to really share the overall story.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. I know, like, when I tell my story, some of the things that we talk about is a couple of years ago, we went through a season in our household that was really pretty hard. And as I share
Yeah.
that vulnerably, it actually helps people to like connect. And your story doesn't have to be my story or vice
Mhm.
versa, but you realize, I don't know, for me, I don't ever want to necessarily have the persona of everything. Like, life is great, let's just be clear, but also there's
Mhm.
a lot of parts of life that are really, they're hard, they're
Mhm.
struggle, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of growth that happens, and you don't always see all that. So I love what you're talking about, is just encouraging somebody right now to be able to say, just show up. Like, how would you
Mhm.
recommend that somebody, if you're coaching somebody who's in the entrepreneur space, not necessarily a brand that's a hotel, but an individual who's an
Mhm.
entrepreneur and maybe they want to be able to level up, how would you coach them right now to be able to say, what's one thing you can do in your business, in your content strategy to help bring an element of realness to who you are?
Yeah. My first instinct is just hit the record button, right? If we're
Mm,
talking content strategy alone, I
yeah.
think the number one obstacle I hear people say is my camera's not good enough, or I need this kind of lighting, or I need
Right.
this to look perfect, right? You're creating so many necessities that you
Hmm.
need in order to start even creating content.
Yeah.
And for me, as a content creator myself, on for Emily Elizabeth as a personal brand, the best content I've ever had just came from putting it against a
Yeah.
counter or whatever and like
Yeah.
filming myself. And it's always like in the post production where you get to see what works and what doesn't.
Mm,
So that's actually the beauty of the rawness, is actually filming in the raw form. And if you don't
yeah.
like it, just toss it. You don't have
Right.
to end up posting it. But that's
Yeah.
actually how you get the rawness, is actually when I make content. Let's say I'm making my bed and it's lifestyle content creation, I'm actually just filming myself even in my pajamas making the bed. And then of course
Right.
in post production I splice it up. And that's actually how you get the rawness, is in the moment I just propped my camera up and started filming, instead
Yeah.
of going, okay, wait, let me make sure my hair is good, let me make sure I put on some makeup. And
Right.
then by that point it's already getting curated. So
Mhm.
raw is as what the word means, just raw, like in the moment.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And isn't it interesting too, when we grab our phones and we're looking at, and we're like, wait a minute, I don't have enough. Yeah, you can upgrade to the better camera, better microphone, lights, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But
Hmm.
we all carry around these $1,000 amazing cameras in our purse and in our
Yeah.
pockets. Like, how is
Yeah.
that not enough, really?
Yeah.
Just get started with there. I have a friend of mine who does a phenomenal job in content creation, and she always says, if any of you have kids at home, like, just have your kids be the one that are filming you and tell you what to do,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
their ideas are so much simpler than sometimes
Hmm.
the older we get, sometimes the harder it can get, but it doesn't need to be. Let's just be clear. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to get harder just because we feel like we have to show up a certain way. I would
Hmm.
add to that also, it's sometimes it's a lot more fun just to just show up and I'm just here today. We're going to do what we do. If I make a mistake,
Yeah.
that's great, because it actually frees, what I notice is it frees everybody else to just show up in who they're supposed to be. Right then,
Mm-hmm.
right there, we don't have to worry about anything. And so there's a lot of freedom when you create content that way. And I don't know, have you found that to be the case too?
Is that when you create more raw content,
Mm-hmm.
it is more inspiring to your audience, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even if I can imagine, for example, there are times where I watch mom bloggers or mom female entrepreneurs that are also moms,
Yeah.
and I see the behind the scenes of how they take care of their kids and also
Mm-hmm.
show up in their work, something that they love to do. For
Yeah.
me, as a 20-some-year-old who knows that's a next chapter in my life down the road, I feel inspired when I see the
Mm,
behind the scenes of both, right?
right.
You don't, it's, there's nothing picture perfect about cramming in, making breakfast for the kids. Exactly. And then getting ready because you need to get to work, you need to do your
Right.
thing, but you're showing up because you love it. For me as a viewer, I feel inspired by seeing, that's what it actually looks like. And you know
Right.
what? Like someone else is doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
I personally feel inspired when I see someone doing the thing that for me, I'm thinking, okay, 10 years down the line, what does that look like? Has anyone else done it? Because then it tells you as well, in my opinion, that, okay, this is not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Someone
That's
else has
right.
done it. I can do it as well. So I think in a way you're contributing to the world when you're showing, hey, I can do this, so can you. So
Yeah.
some random viewer can show up and see that video or that image and be like, wow, this is giving me the push to start the thing that I want to do.
Right. Yeah. There's a book I've been reading. I don't have it handy. It's called U Squared by Price Pritchett. I think is that. Hopefully that's correct. We'll make sure and correct it in the show notes if that's not accurate. But one of the chapters, it's a tiny little book. It has, each chapter is only like 2 pages. On one of the chapters, he talks about just start before you're ready. And in
Mm-hmm.
this concept that we've been talking about of just show up, just start creating. Here's the good news. If you're just starting out, chances are nobody's following you, or not that many people are following you. Maybe it's
Yeah.
like your mom and your sister, and that's
Yeah.
great. So just start, because the more reps you do, the more times you get out there, the more comfortable you get, and the more just casual you can be instead of having to be everything. I know a lot of people, they'll say, Anita, do you have like scripts and stuff like that? Yes, I have all that. But for me personally, like the script is not the way to go. It gets too
Yeah.
robotic, right?
Exactly.
I just want to show up and have a conversation with somebody. I want to meet somebody new. I want to, like
Mm-hmm.
you, I want to meet my new best friend that lives in New
Mm-hmm.
York City now,
Mm-hmm.
and start just a conversation around things that connect with us, with one another. And that makes the biggest
Absolutely.
difference for sure.
I just think that when we try to curate something too much and we try
Yeah.
to, I think, imagine this, right? When we're, as funny of an example, I think like when I cook, when I start to learn a recipe a little bit easier, I don't start to measure everything out precisely anymore. I go,
Yeah.
okay, I can feel out the recipe and I feel more relaxed. Whereas when you're first starting out and you're maybe trying to impress a partner or whoever, the
Yeah.
kids, okay, a mom can make the best meal. It's you're trying to be super precise and then you're a little bit even stressed for, okay, I want to make this like the perfect dish. And then once you get more comfortable with it, you start to not actually follow the rule book. So I think it's similar when you don't follow any kind of structure or rule book when you're filming or creating content, you're going to naturally feel more relaxed because you don't create any inner expectations for whatever reason. You're just
Yeah.
showing up as who you are.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I love that. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. Okay, so let's talk about like your athletic background. I'm really intrigued
Mhm.
by what you said, that because here's what I heard from you. You said essentially, I'm going to paraphrase it. You had a season in your life that the discipline and the structure and going after the goals of an athlete really helped
Mhm.
kick off your business. But then you
Yeah.
also said that, but now I look back in some ways, look back in a little bit of regret. So talk to me. There's a really interesting kind of like juxtaposition there of, wait a minute, because
Mhm.
let me just say, you're young. Like, to
Mhm.
me, to hear you say, wait a minute, I'm just going to throw in a number. At 10 years old, I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't show up differently. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, if you were already an athlete and you were already successful, come on already.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
going on in your mind there? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. I think for context, I was competitively training probably from the age of 7 years old till I was about 18. And that's in figure skating. And then tennis, I did separately. With figure skating, I was very lucky to train in an environment by the time I was in my early teens with fellow Olympians and Team
Mhm.
USA athletes
Yeah.
at University of Delaware. And I think that has a big role in
Oh
my
yeah.
level of regret and a way of feeling FOMO when I watched the last Olympics, because two of my former training mates actually competed. And
Ah,
yeah, so I think that plays a context role, right? Where it's okay, people that you were training with at the age of 15, I remember, and they deserved it. They definitely had way more 200% effort than I did at the time. And again, I don't regret like how my path turned out, but I recognize and have self-awareness in I didn't apply myself at 150% level like my training mates did. And
mhm.
that's where their path took them. And so I think I recognize that while, yes, I did have a leg up in this level of discipline that I had compared to just my average friend or peer, it is very different. But when you are in an environment where it's very elite level, similar in business, when you're around entrepreneurs that are just performing at this level, it
Right.
is a very different game. And I think to each their own, not everyone prefers that environment, but
Mhm.
I know the feeling of what it's like to be inside a rink, an arena where everyone's doing triples and they're sweating and they're working really hard. And so I think I look back after college, I realized, okay, I have an opportunity to set my life up now moving forward as an
Yeah.
adult, right? What does that look like? And what was my dream back then? I think it was when I watched the Olympics, I was like, oh, I wish I had tried harder so I could have at least had a chance to try for the Olympics. And so I didn't. And I think that's where the regret comes in, where I go, okay, I regret not trying hard enough. What can I do differently in my life now to set myself up so that I'm not going to regret when I'm, let's say, 35, that I
Mhm.
didn't do this when I was 25, 26,
Gotcha.
27.
Gotcha. Okay, so then how does that drive your decisions and the way that you serve your clients right now?
Yeah, I think it drives my willingness to show up even when I don't feel like it. I
Mm.
think anyone knows this as an entrepreneur. You are working for yourself and you also can slack off for yourself if you want to, right? There are many
Yeah.
days where we wake up and we don't feel like it, or we
Mhm.
wake up and we feel like we don't want to do the work. And it's different when you work for a company and you
Mhm.
have to show up or else you'll get fired. And so I think that has played a role in not only knowing that comes with the territory of
Right.
entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
but it enables me to show up at an exceptional level, right? I always
Mm.
think, okay, when I went to practice, right? If
Yep.
I'm going to practice right now, so that's how I look at every day. It's just another day of practice, another day of life, right? How can I show up 150% for the people that pay me to partner with them and serve their business, for even my personal relationships, right? If a friend needs me, how can I show up in the best friend way possible for them?
Mhm.
And so I think that's how I apply it in my life. And I think the easiest way to put it is, how do I show up in the most intentional way in all
Mm.
aspects of my life?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. In our household, we talk a lot about intentionality, and we're a homeschooling
Hmm.
family. We just are getting ready to start up another year of homeschooling in a couple months here, and we've been doing it for 15 plus years. And
Wow.
one of the things that we have always talked about is this is an intentional thing that we've done with our kids, and it's produced a tremendous amount of fruit in our household in a lot of
Mm,
ways, but this was an intention that we had. And so I
mm,
love the word intentionality there, because here's what I'm hearing you say also is that you can intentionally show up around your business, and on the day that you decide that you're on the days that you need to be there for client work or to produce things for your own business, then you show up intentionally. But then you also give yourself the freedom to intentionally serve all these other areas. There's something like 7 areas of life. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. I always write, but
mhm.
life is made up of all of the parts of our life, right? Our
Yeah,
finances are important, and so is our family, and so is
yeah,
whatever community, and so is your body being healthy and your food choices, and so, right? And so is nurturing yourself. Like all these, so
yeah.
is your career. There's all these elements of life that are super important. And
Mhm.
when we have one that's like way out of whack, I know I
Yeah.
experienced this in my corporate career for a long time, right? In the
Mm,
corporate world, everybody's, you go drive no matter what. There's this HR mantra that somehow work life balance. And you're telling me that there's work-life balance when I'm working for you 80 hours a week. That's not balance.
Right.
Let's just be clear. My husband
Yeah.
and my kids are telling you that's not balance. But I didn't hear that from you, Emily, at all. What I heard and what was really beautiful is when you say that you're going to show up and be intentional in
Hmm.
whatever area of life you do, it actually gives you more freedom to show up with that intentionality for
Hmm.
every area. So, can you speak
Hmm.
to that a little bit more? What are your thoughts around? I guess maybe the underlying question is how do we, as entrepreneurs, because there is the opportunity to work 7 days a week, totally around the clock, and make almost no money all at the same time.
Hmm.
Like, how do we help somebody who's listening to move in the direction of being intentional about both their business life and their personal life together?
Yeah. I think this has always been at the forefront for me. Luckily, I recognized that after I graduated from college. I realized that, okay, I want to have the ability down the road to have loads of flexibility to be
Yeah.
present, whether that is with a family or only with a partner, whatever that looks like in my life.
Mhm.
I want to have the option to be fully present. And I think knowing that not only allowed me to go, okay, during these years, I'm going to have a level of focus to push myself ahead to create that flexibility down the road.
Yeah.
But I think also recognizing not only from learning from others who have more life experience than me, and also just going through my own experiences with breakups and friendship breakups, even all of that, I realized that the core component of it all
Mm.
is not the success in my career and not the material things and all a lot of that some people can see on social media, but rather the quality of our
Mm.
relationships, right? So I
Yeah.
think when I go and do my work, and whether I'm spending a lot of hours or I'm spending less hours that day, I lead with the intention of my relationships with the people that I do business with and the people in my personal life, and
Mhm.
usually they intertwine as well. My intention is that is always at the forefront. That is there's strength in those relationships, because I noticed that without that strength, so I think even if I had a family, I can imagine if there's other things going on within the family or with my partner, I know deep down that would affect
Yeah.
my business. That would
Right.
affect how I show up. And so I think that's how I know where the line is drawn on,
Mhm.
okay, this needs to get fixed first in order for me to actually be able to move fast within the business or whatever it is that I
Mm.
actually really want to do. And
Yeah.
so sometimes I notice that people don't have a clear idea of the why. So
Mm.
for me, like I said earlier, I my why is having that flexibility to be present whenever and wherever I want. And in order to create that flexibility, I need to, of course, put in some work now, but also create that intention and remember the why behind why I want that. And I think that's because of the relationships and the quality of relationships and the relevance it has on our life.
Yeah, that's powerful. Super powerful. I love that. I love that you're speaking to other women that are like in and around your generation, your age group.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, for my peeps, like people around my
Mm-hmm.
age, I know a lot of times we were told, especially from the corporate arena, is that, yeah, we just were given this message that you can either have time freedom or you can have money freedom. But
Mm-hmm.
don't we know, especially since COVID, and the
Yeah.
way that online businesses work today, the freedom that
Mm-hmm.
we, especially as women, right? When we
Mm-hmm.
either do or do not right now, this second, but eventually maybe wear the hats of wife and mother and
Yeah.
entrepreneur and all these things. I know that and for me personally, like, I'm so grateful that I
Mm-hmm.
can actually have both money and time freedom, because I've had
Yeah.
seasons where I could have one. It felt like I could only have one or the other, and that's just a lie. Being
Mm.
able to really be able to lean in and say, you can actually have both and you don't have to
Yeah.
choose. Because for
Yeah.
so long as women, we were told you could have one or the other, right?
Mhm.
You can only have one or the other. And I don't believe they're actually mutually exclusive at all anymore.
I absolutely agree. And I think to my point earlier about people showing that online through content, for example,
Hmm.
that is inspiring to me when I look at moms who are doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Not only do I personally have that belief and philosophy that I would like to show up in the future, if I'm a mom, I would love to show up as a mom and A, B, C, and D,
Mhm.
right? And I think, in my opinion, that helps shows my future kids that you don't have to be just one thing, number one, right? Where some people have maybe taught in the past years where it's like, oh, one or the other, like you're
Yeah.
saying. And so I think back to what I'm saying earlier, I think people who are listening, if that is something that they're doing behind the scenes, I think that's awesome for them to share, find a
Mhm.
way to share that with the world, because that's inspiring for people like myself, right? I'm not in that chapter yet, but to me, it exposes that idea of this is possible. We
Yeah.
do not have to limit ourselves to being put in a box of one or the other, career or family at home, whatever that may look like. I genuinely believe that I can have both down the line.
Yeah. One of the things that I did when I transitioned into being an entrepreneur, I've been a corporate executive, then full-time
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom, and then started another business about 5 years ago. And I would say my inspiration, I love what you're talking about. If you don't have kids, if you do have kids, I would say oftentimes as current moms, our inspiration is I want to be able to model this kind of freedom for my own kids. Being
Mhm.
able to say, so we
Mhm.
had this transition in our household that's fun, and I think you get a kick out of this, where I used to tell my kids, because this is what was taught to me, that there's only one path to success, and it was like this linear line. It was like high school, SATs, college. That's it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because that's what we were
Yeah.
taught. No, nothing
Right.
against my parents or grandparents, but that was the clear message that the
Right.
best way to success was more
Mhm.
education, high education. And I love higher education, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not a, but what I notice is that nowadays, especially, there are so many ways to get to the goal,
Mhm. Yes.
right? There's so many paths. And so about right 7 years ago, we started shifting the things that we were saying in our household. Yes, that is a path to success, but it's not the
Mm.
only path to success. And I remember
Right.
my daughter used to say in the early days, she'd be like, "Who are you? And what did you do with my mom?" And I'd be like, I just think like God, for me, like the context was God. It was like God was opening up my eyes to see that there's all these different ways that we can get to the goal. There's dozens of ways so we can go after any one thing that we
Right.
want in life. And
Right.
so being able to open up that mindset and then be able to show my kids, this is what it looks like with my husband's support. This is what it looks like to be a healthy entrepreneur. This is what it
Mhm.
looks like to go after your dreams, regardless of your age. Like you can start a
Right.
business at 15, you can start a business at, I don't know, 60, whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like anywhere
Right.
in between, you actually have the freedom to do these things. And especially now post COVID, like it's
Yeah.
awesome because as you mentioned earlier, like the barrier to entry is so much lower, but then the ability to deliver high value is so much higher, right?
Yes.
And so it gets so exciting because
Mhm.
the way I look at it is like there's so many possibilities. So to bring it full circle, what you were talking is about is you wanted to be able to do tasks now so that you could have a benefit later. And but I'm
Mhm.
also saying that for those that are already parents and already moms and dads that are listening to the show, sometimes your why is I just want to be able to teach my people right here,
Right.
right now,
Right.
that this
Right.
is what freedom actually looks like and this is what you can do. And man, it's been so powerful. I still have two teenagers at home and they tell me all the time, Mom, I'm so like, thank you. Thank you for what you
Yeah.
do because it inspires me.
And I think that actually is interesting because that goes full circle with my thought process, which is
Yes.
that if I'm fortunate enough to be a mother, that they get to see that as well. Like you're saying, that
Yeah.
when they are 10, 15 years old and 20 years old down the road, when they start to be able to recognize things more in a mature way, they get to visualize and see, oh, I had a present mom who was also working
Yeah.
and was also doing that. So then they get to see a reality that is possible for them if they were to choose something similar. And
Yeah.
I think that's, again, goes full circle because that's like the domino effect that I would like to have on listeners of mine as well as my potential children.
Yeah. So who was like the biggest, that kind of begs the question for you. Who is the biggest maybe influencer or the biggest motivator as an individual for you to open your eyes a little bit wider to see what was possible to be able to take you to where you are right now?
It's interesting because it was actually a literal influencer, so to speak, and also an entrepreneur, but her name is Lauren Bostic.
Okay.
And she's the founder of the Skinny Confidential. And she's, I believe, now in her late 30s and also is a mom of two.
Okay.
And I think that's what has been awesome seeing the journey. I found her before she had kids. Now have been still following her since her having children and whatnot and moving into this chapter of her life. And I
Yeah.
think that me being about 10, 15 years younger than her, I was able to really see, okay, this is her. She had her hardworking phase and now she's in her mom phase, still doing all the things that she
Yeah.
was doing prior, maybe at a little bit of different scale, scope, whatever. But to me, it showed that was possible and that it amplified that internal desire of this is the lifestyle I want. I want to have that kind of partnership, that the one that she has with her spouse, and I want to have that kind of flexibility to be able to travel with my kids even when they're that young and
Right.
to be able to be present with them, and also on certain days too be able to show them, hey, mom has to work because this is how we live this lifestyle or have this freedom. And I love seeing that and being so mindful about that at this age, because I don't know if way back in the day that was possible for my parents to be able to have such a thought loop on it in their 20s about, okay, this is the kind of life I maybe want to build 10, 15 years down the line and when
Yeah.
we have kids.
Yeah. That's awesome. What do you think's
Yeah.
been like your most impactful? How do I want to say this? What's like what when you think of this gal that's the influencer? Would you say her name is Lauren?
Lauren Bostic.
Okay. So when you
Mm-hmm.
looked at Lauren, what were like the polarizing, like, you gave me a lot of like, I can do this. What were some of were there pieces of the story where like, I definitely don't want to do anything like that? It doesn't have to be related to Lauren, but what were the areas in your life that were like polarizing, like, that's a total no for me?
To be honest, there's nothing that I can think of. I think the only thing that I can think of in general that I knew that I didn't want was that at least as of now too, that could change when I'm, older and maybe in a position of being a mom. But I
Yeah.
think I always loved the idea and seeing people do this too, but not dropping their passion and their interest as an individual.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
really loved, and that's why I would say to that question, a big no might be not dropping
Mm,
myself, my sense of self, my sense of individuality, even when I become a mom.
mm,
And I think sometimes I've seen that, not necessarily from female entrepreneurs, but maybe just those that didn't have something going prior that was like really strong, or maybe they just never jumped back on the wagon of being like, okay, you know what, I need to revisit who Emily is and I need to make sure she's
yeah.
continuing to prioritize herself. Because something I've noticed through observation is that when you are a mom and you get to fill your own cup, you also get to show up as the best version of yourself as a woman, as a partner, as a spouse, and as a mom. And I think that comes back to prioritizing yourself in that way.
Mhm.
And I think that's why it comes back to the no for me would be giving myself up for
Mm,
just the kids. And I think that's where I was able to see that out of observation, that it is actually probably more healthy to continue to put myself first in order to show up best for the kids.
yeah. Yeah. Mm, that's interesting. I know, yeah, sometimes life just twists and turns too. Even in
Yeah,
all that, sometimes, oh, I didn't expect this. We see that.
right.
Okay, so when you're, I guess maybe a little bit more personal question is
Yeah.
when you are in dating relationships and you,
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming, have these kinds of conversations. Like, I know for me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
super fortunate because my husband's, babe, you're amazing. Just go do what you do. Like, you can only show
Right.
up the way you do. So the benefit of living like with my biggest group of cheerleaders on the planet in my own household, whether it's my
Yeah.
kids or my husband, like that has so encouraged me to be able to not feel like I'm being told what to do, but also the freedom for my husband that says, I love you, you're amazing, I support you no matter what, go. And I'm always responsible with that. Let me just, I don't know if I need to clarify that, but let's just be
Yeah.
clear. I'm always responsible with that burden and that responsibility. But
Mm-hmm.
are these kind of like conversations that you have with your friends or with dating prospects and all this kind of stuff? Like how does that work out?
Yeah, and what would you say in terms of what are the potential conversations or
Yeah.
questions would that be with the
Yeah.
romantic partner?
Oh, just being able to say, hey, this is the lifestyle that I'm looking for. Are
Uh,
you on
mhm.
board with some of these things? So you can, when I'm thinking in your age group, like if I were your mom
Yeah.
and I was coaching you, I'd be like, honey, make sure that you're asking some of these questions so you can ferret out and figure out, is he on board with what you're talking about? So that here's what I know about the most. So my husband and I all married almost 20 years. We
Hmm.
don't always have to be in the same place in life. We've
Yes.
identified that in our household, but and we don't always have to be shoulder to shoulder, but we've decided we do have to be safe facing in the same direction. One can be
Hmm.
ahead, one can be behind, if you will, but we can't
Yeah.
both be facing that way or that way, right? Away from one another in any way, shape, or form. And that's
Hmm.
actually led to a great deal of success because that allows each of us to have
Hmm.
seasons where one's moving forward, one's working on something, catch up a little bit later, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, are these kinds of conversations that you have in your life with your friends as you're talking about it and future partners?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm currently in a relationship, and it was one of those questions and topics that I very much approached in the beginning because I
Mm-hmm.
think, I've always been naturally a long-term thinker, and I think I've always approached dating with a long-term mindset in terms of, hey, I love to enjoy dating and whatnot, but I also want to make sure that there's some signs of long-term alignment,
Yeah, I can see that
especially
about
with
you.
yeah. So I think luckily with my current partner, it's been in alignment. It's something that he's very aware about, and I noticed that in general, the more open and upfront I
Mm-hmm.
am about the things that I value, my personal values, as well as how I would like to live my life, the sooner I get to that, the better it
Mm-hmm.
is to actually ensure that person is can be considered a viable partner long
Yeah,
term, because of course there are other people that might prefer something different or might prefer their partner to be in a completely different role, and maybe they would prefer that I'm not doing the things that I would love to do. And that's okay. I just think at that point, then there's clear misalignment,
yeah,
probably a level of incompatibility. Yeah. So I do have those conversations. And I think that it's also been eye opening to learn as I've gotten older and obviously into more serious dating that, yeah, sometimes some male partners are not for that. And
mm-hmm.
you know what? And
Yeah,
that's okay too, because then that's not for me.
yeah. That's awesome. Good job,
Thanks.
Emily. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Circling back to just business related stuff. Thank you for sharing that. I
Mhm.
appreciate your
Of
vulnerability. I
course.
appreciate your
Yeah.
honesty. It's very refreshing to hear.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have one more thing to share about that too, because I
Yeah.
realized, thinking as you asked that question, I realized that when I was younger, and perhaps this could be relevant to the moms listening out there, whether they have daughters or maybe they heard this as well growing up. But I think my mom often had a framework and belief that if I am this ambitious or
Mm,
this sharp or these terminologies that she would use, she always expressed a level of concern
mm,
for me being able to pair up with a male partner. I don't know if
mhm.
you've seen that or
Yes.
heard that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
notion yourself,
I've
right?
experienced.
And
Yeah.
okay, yeah, it's fascinating because I think, again, with vulnerability, the more I heard other women share that as being told to them, and then once again, overcoming that and actually being with a partner that supports them and loves them for
Mhm.
that helped me see, okay, once again, a reality that is real,
Yeah.
that does exist, and I'm able to have that as well. And so I think I'm very glad that I didn't subscribe to that belief that
Mhm.
I might not be able to date in a certain way
Mhm.
because I like to have a fulfilling life on my own, that
Yeah.
I love to pursue my passions, my interests. And I think that it's important for women, no matter at what stage they're at in life, to know that, number one, that there are partners out there that
Yeah.
exist that are very supportive of that. And number two, just that we don't have to subscribe to those beliefs at all.
Tell you, I'm so glad that you added that. As I'll tell you here, part of my personal story is being the primary breadwinner in our household for a lot of
Mhm,
years, and even having my
mhm,
husband and I made a decision that he would even have a season where he stayed home with the kids when they were little.
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
That was culture shock for everybody around us. That was hard for a lot of people to
Yeah.
understand. It was hard to find supportive family members or friends that could come alongside
Mm.
of us. And it made it
Yeah.
always interesting. We'd go to like dinner parties, and because I was in tech and an executive,
Mm-hmm.
I usually would
Mm.
gravitate to all the guys in the room and
Yeah.
have conversations with all of them because I didn't relate to all the stay-at-home moms and that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I totally get that. And I having the same kinds of conversations with family or friends are like, Anita, you can't do that. And or maybe my grandma saying, what's a man
Yeah.
gonna think? And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet that you think that, but
Absolutely.
sorry. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
thing. It's really a thing. So the other thing that I notice too sometimes is that this was my experience is that inside of the church, I also had, because we had these different roles than the traditional roles, there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of judgment. There was a
Yeah.
lot of, come join us, Anita, as I started having kids. Oh, come join us for MOPS or something like that. Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
make friends, connect with other like-minded people.
Yeah.
When can we meet? Oh, 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I was like, by 9 a.m. Monday morning, I've already been up for 4 hours and done quarter my workday. And I'm probably on a
Yeah.
conference call. Like it's a no for me. Right. So
Right. Right.
sometimes it's hard. The reason that I say that is sometimes it's hard to find the groove of the people that are going to come
Mm-hmm.
alongside and support you. But as you're listening
Yeah.
today, if you notice what Emily and I are talking about, is that there are people out there that you can
Mm-hmm.
find that
Mm-hmm.
can champion you for the way that God made you. If
Yeah.
we're driven and
Yeah.
we have these desires, like my personality style is super driven, super
Mm-hmm.
task oriented. Let's go. I got stuff to get done
Mm-hmm.
today. All right.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
husband is not that personality style, but we have learned in our marriage to be able to champion the way, what we call the way that God's made each of us, and
Mm-hmm.
say, you're on the right path, go and do the things that you're supposed to do. Because here's the reality is that we all, no matter what you believe in life, we all have a
Mm-hmm.
purpose and we all have a plan to show up and do the things that we're supposed to do while we're here. And wake up to that purpose if you need to. If this is your wake up
Yeah.
call, wake up to what
Yeah.
Emily and I are talking about. Find your people that are going to support you
Mm-hmm.
along the way and go for it.
Yeah.
It's so fulfilling when you're stepping in your, what I'll call your God-given purpose, dreams, passions, desires, and having that line up and then find, you don't need a lot. Some
Mm-hmm.
people to come around you and be like, you're pretty amazing. This is awesome. Go for it. I can
Right.
say that for a big chunk of my career and raising my kids, I didn't have that. And it wasn't until I had other women that believed in me and came around me where they'd be like, Anita, you're made to do these kinds of things. You're made to be a leader. You're
Mm.
made to be and pour into that.
Yeah.
And it was really powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful to be able to have that emotional support
Mm-hmm.
from friends and family and a partner especially. And I
Yeah.
think that's why, again, very glad to have these conversations with other like-minded individuals and also just to continuously hear, yep, like I've been told that before, either
Yep.
by mom or grandma. And
Yeah.
and so I think the more we all acknowledge, okay, we've heard that before and it is not true, then I just think it helps other people open up to what their potential purpose may be.
Yeah. Awesome. Ah, good job. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate
This has been a
that.
very different conversation than I normally have, but I just feel like my mom's heart saying, good job, Emily. Keep going.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you.
Awesome. Okay, so Emily, as we wrap up here today, like how can people how can they connect with you? How can they learn about more about you and your journey and what you're on and follow you and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So, the best way to connect with me and just my content in general, I would say, is What Fulfills You, the podcast. It's available on Apple, Spotify, all podcast platforms. I'm active on Instagram as well. So, my personal one is at Emily E. Duong, and my podcast Instagram is just at What Fulfills You.
Awesome. Oh, well, thank you so much for being here today. I just want to honor you. The way that you show up is it's authentic, it's beautiful. I love the way that you tell stories about your clients and their successes. And then I just really appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty today. I probably asked some questions that you might not normally get asked on a podcast, but I
Yeah,
thank
I
you
love it.
because you know what? I know that right now today, like you shifted a mindset in a woman who is listening today to be able to take that next step. So any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the best thing I could share, just women to women, is to be able to really listen to
Mm,
your sense of self and to continue to never forget it, to never forget that sense of self, to never forget. The way I would put it to myself is to never forget younger Emily, because
yeah.
she's in there and she's a person, she's got passions, she's got interests. So keep going in that direction despite what other people say.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. We totally appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.